Hi, good afternoon. This is the second part of a lecture. It's a mini lecture, or call it like that, or a presentation if you want. And it concludes the lecture that I just posted. So you should be able to download both lectures from two different links, but they form just one lecture. And really, the purpose of this lecture is to um, explain, having seen the limitations and the constraints of implementing circular business models, which to for what they are, you want to go to the first lecture. We want to now talk about ways that this can be addressed, how these issues can be resolved of constraints of this circular business model. So as before, I'm going to share a presentation. To take so hopefully, okay, now you should be able to see it. Should be able to see the presentation. Okay, the animation doesn't work that well. There was supposed to be an animation there, but it seems not to working, or that's probably me get me wrong. The phrase there is "no man is an island," and what I want to say is the circle is a networking thing, meaning that if you want to design and implement a circular business model, you need to know that you need a network in order for it to work. And I'm going to explain what that means in this presentation. So that's the title. How do you leverage networks to support the circular business models? To introduce myself again, I'm Dr. Maurizio Catulli, and my interest is circular business models and the circular economy. I am director of the Center for Research in Just Transitions, which is a CIC, or a community interest company. So I got a focus here. So what I want to actually talk about, which is the description of how an organization, in order to address the difficulties of circular business models, can design and implement circular business models by leveraging on networks, so building networks to do that. And then we want to also touch base on the role of digital technologies in addressing the issues of business models. So the first thing I want to actually recap a little bit. I mentioned what the limitations of business models are earlier, and for example, there is the problems of being sure that the valorized waste is actually available, so you actually can get it at the right time. Also, you want to know what quality it is in, how does it get to you, so the logistics, and this boils down to unpredictability. So you actually are waiting for surplus materials that you want to use as raw materials, such as recycled steel, and it doesn't get to you when you need it, which may have financial constraints. You may stop the production line. So there may be serious consequences that need to be resolved. So the first thing I want to talk about was uh, see how actually a business model can be designed. That's the first step. So I got a concept here which is called a socio-technical niche. It is part of a theoretical framework, which is, I'm not going to cover it here, but it's a theoretical framework which describes how innovation comes about, transitioning to an innovative business model. And it has got three levels, which includes the socio-technical landscape and socio-technical regime. I'm not going to cover them here. What we're going to discuss is the socio-technical niche. And what that is basically like a living lab. So it's a place which is protected from influences from the mainstream business models, and in this you can actually test, design, and even implement several business models on a small scale. And who is going to be in there? So when you actually come up with a circular innovation, so a business model which is circular, you might want to collaborate with a number of organizations. For example, you could collaborate with the university, so the universities will carry research activities that can feed into your business model. You might collaborate with other companies, such as a supplier of steel collaborating with a company that makes steel products or products made of steel. You might want to collaborate with not-for-profit organization. So, for example, you could work with the Ellen MacArthur Foundations or other organizations that are into the circular economy. And all this organization creates a sort of network. This network operates on a small scale in something which is a living lab or a social technical niche. And as we say, this is a protected place. So if you are experimenting with recycling steel or plastics or rare materials such as cadmium and lithium, it is going to be relatively easy to get hold of them, and you'll be able to predict the availability and status and quality of these recycled materials, so you can valorize the waste. However, if you are in the open market, that can be much harder, and so it may be I may have to explain some areas, some actions that you may have to perform in order to make sure you can access the materials. So I want to return on industrial symbiosis. I mentioned that in the previous lecture. So that's a corollary of the industrial ecology. But industrial symbiosis in particular focuses on recovering materials from a company that wastes them or surplus production, and then you can, or your company might reuse them for their purposes. For example, they may use them as raw materials, such as a company manufacturing washing machines that recover some steel wasted by the car companies. So that requires relationship. So it's all about relationship. They need to have a relationship which is based on trust, so they can trust the other the partner that is able to deliver the surplus steel at the right time, or the plastics at the right time. And that really also needs to be at various levels, because, for example, you may actually recover material from a manufacturer, but also from a retailer or even from the consumers. So relationships and connections in that perspective are very important. So I want to go through a theoretical framework, which we call the ARA framework, or activity, resources, and actors bonds. And what that is a sort of, in a way, a framework that describes how you, a manager of an organization, or perhaps a leader of a not-for-profit organization, could actually create a network with organizations in order to ensure that you are able to secure the supply of, for example, a waste or surplus products. Security of supply or provision is very important, and that system can eat you up. So this is a sort of framework which has been, shall we say, assembled by myself together with a gentleman called Professor Ross Brennan, who unfortunately is no longer with us. And what we did, we took some subsets of theory and we put them together. In the first section, you got ARA, which is basically actor bonds, resource ties, and activity links. What that stands for is, so if you got a number of organizations, it is important that they create a sort of relationship based on trust. So it's about creating links or ties or bonds between managers and human beings in order to be able to trust them. So if you know very well the manager of a supplier, then you can trust them that they're going to deliver the waste materials at the right time. The second step is trying to create a link with resources. So this link could be actually also financial. I'll give an example. In the previous lecture, what I said is that in a circular model, something that you need to have is companies that specialize in recovering waste and processing it. And these companies will have capabilities and also then have resources like machinery. So if you are a company such as Nestle, let's say Nestle, they want to recover some food or even Tesco, you may actually invest, so could buy facilities such as machines with a company that is able to, for example, composting food or recovering food. So instead of just using a provider and say, yeah, that's the food, just process it in order to make it compost or make it into fuel, you actually are collaborating with them and actually giving them money, or rather co-investing with them in some resources that are needed to do the job. So that's a very important aspect. And the third one is activity link. So performing activities together, which doesn't mean going on a trip or going, organizing a party. What that means is, for example, could you have a website that you design together, and this website is used by a buyer to check that there is availability of materials online. So they would have a sign-in name and a password, and they would be able to do that. So that's an example, a link that can be an activity that can be performed together by two different parties. And the idea is the same, companies having ideas together and trying to pursue them. So that's the first section. The second section is the governmental actors. Just to give you an idea, if you are a company that has got composting technology for food, then governmental actors can include local authorities that could potentially, actually fund, give a grant for your company to be able to deliver their service. The next one is about effect between dyadic. So in other words, two companies is a dyad or network plus more companies. So that has got to do with creation of trust between the organizations, try to cooperate. Unfortunately, sometimes you need to deal with conflict as well. So that's another aspect that you need to resolve. There is also an issue of power. So who has got the power? Is it the composting company that has got power, or is Tesco or whatever company? So it's a very important aspect to understand when you're designing your network. Then you got a phenomenon which is called adaptation. So as the two companies or five companies or the network starts to work together, then you need to go through a set of adaptations, change in time. So you may have a strategic adaptation, which is something that you plan, and so there's a certain plan to it. Or it could be emergent. In other words, something that just happens out of the blue as you are working and designing the network. Plus, you got tactical. So basically, that's an emergency situation when things are not working well. And there is also the socialization aspect. In other words, two companies start to work in a way that they actually adapt to each other and they sort of know each other. So in a network, if you've got people, the managers, the staff, that actually know the staff of their organizations, they change their practices and they change the way they behave depending on that. So there is an adaptation going on in there. The other section is market device. So market device is sort of features of the market that structure what the organization do. For example, ISO from 2001, we can call this a market device because as companies try to change their practices in order to comply with that particular standard, like ISO for 2001, that shapes their dealings and the way the network is designed. For example, a buyer might say, I'm talking about an industrial buyer, might say with a provider, either you are ISO 14001 certified, or I won't be able to buy from you because I need my distribution network to be ISO 14001 certified. So that's a very important aspect of the network formation because it's like an admission ticket, as it were. There are other market devices. Sometimes you go industrial standards, even legal standards, or even technological like API or application process interface or protocol interface. So you got some pieces of software that link other pieces of software. So technological standard is also a sort of market device. Last but not least, that's a recent addition. You got users practices. So what that means is consumers. So as a consumer, I might be more used and favorable to recycling product. And as a manager or staff, members of the staff that might perform practice in a way rather than another. So what I showed you is a sort of framework that for a manager that wants to implement a sustainable business model is a little bit like a recipe or a sort of structure for you to generate or create a network and establish a network. Once you find out who your partners are, so for example, you may be a company that needs to buy steel and you link with a steel recycler who in turn link to a car manufacturer. So you identify the type of company you want to get in touch. Then as you create the network, you've got to perform all those steps. So you need to sort of make friends, create active bonds, but then you need to invest resources together, link activities, and so on and so forth. So there are all the stages in this model that myself, together with Professor Ross Brennan, sort of composed from other networks. So that's again Abe Steel. So I am reproducing that from the previous lecture. However, here I'm repeating the limitations that they went through, and I want to show you the way we resolved them. So the first step is looking at the business model. I want to show you in practice how the network is created. So the first step was that the managing director, who was called Phil, he established relationships with manufacturers or pluri-manufacturers, such as a couple of organizations, wasting steels, which happen to be car manufacturers. However, he also had to have a relationship with a logistics company. So you had to transport the steel. Again, the circular economy flows, or in practice, that means logistics and transport are a very, very critical aspect. Then they had to have a relationship with organizations that could use the steel. So he created a network. We had to design transverse logistics. So logistics could be direct and reverse, but also transverse to move things between different departments of the company. Then, together with that, he would give advice on waste management. And so that added to the network value. And that also was a sort of shared activity links. So in other words, the two parties look at the waste and resolve some of the problems. On the demand side, we needed to find out who would be interested in buying the refurbished steel. of the recycled steel. So the sales and marketing team had to find out the small things that were manufactured by some company, so more application. So the small cuts of steel could be allocated to some organizations. Then the company supplier buys in designing. So in other words, you got a small object, how can you design to maximize the use of small parts of steel? And then we had to, they would perform just-in-time delivery. And then also, you would relocate some steel that was wasted by Nissan to other departments in Nissan. So in other words, you would actually be able to do transversal reallocation of resources without, finding another buyer for it. So that's an example of the way Abe Steel tried to design a network with organizations. So that's the first thing I wanted to cover. I wanted to explain how what you do first of all when you get to design a circular business model is you've got to create a network because a circular business model is made by service parts and tangible parts, but you need a network, and you also need an infrastructure because, of course, you need to move, parts and waste on the road or on the rail. So an infrastructure is really necessary. And that's basically where you get this network to manage your circular economy and deliver to it. So you always know where the resources are. Next step, because as we said, you can run out of refurbished steel, or you don't know, you are not able to predict where the various materials are coming from. That's where there is a role for the digital technologies. So I'll show you something here. So first of all, if you look at the left-hand side, you've got the various functions that you need to perform. So you got auto plan, auto control, sort and classify. So for example, you got the collection of the waste, say mobile phones. Then you need to take them apart and you've got to sort and classify the various components and parts. So you got plastics in which the casing is made. You've got rare earths, lithium, cadmium, and you need to sort these ones, and you need to sort to innovate because you've got to, make new products, design new products based on the material you got. You need to forecast, so you need to try to predict where you're going to get the materials. So you got a set of activities you've got to perform. And in order to do that, you might have to use digital technologies. Today, one of the things that you got is AI. So artificial intelligence could perform some function. Unfortunately, I got a cat that is come on the scene. For example, AI may do some of the analysis of the data, so they will be able to predict where the material is and integrate the data. But then you got things like robotics, so in other words, automate. Going a step behind, one of the big problems of the circular economy is that it is quite labor intensive because going back to the example of the mobile phone, you might have human parts, human people, human actors that take apart the mobile phone and do the sorting. One of the things that may need to happen, actually will need to happen to make the circular economy viable, is that we need some robotics and automation in order to sort and take apart the various parts. Then you got blockchain technology, so a way to manage the information and track where the parts are. Machine learning, big data analytics, LDBMS, I don't remember what it is, but it's another procedures which is in the digital activities, product lifecycle management system, another one, and then you got social media, RFDI, which I don't remember what it stands for, but the important thing that you sort of absorb is that there is a range of digital technologies that can be used to perform the function of the function that you can see on the left. If you look underneath, there are a set of references which you should write down, because that enable you to actually see what those initials stand for, and also to get some detail. So there is quite a lot of literature now of what digital technologies can actually enable the circular economy. And it's a very exciting development aspect that will make the circular economy more of a reality and make it more possible. So going back to the various limitations, if you remember, in the previous lecture, one of the limitations of the circular economy that I mentioned, when you are recovering raw materials, so in the case of Abe Steel, we were recovering sheets of steel, which is a commodity, as I said in the previous section. And so what that means is that you got something that is very difficult to retain the customer, because the customer may switch in order to get the best price. So the way we resolve this is by creating a co-branding system. So what we did, we trademark a whole award of Abe Steel, and we come up with the sort of contained sustainable Abe Steel logo, and we add some labels for you, so self-adhesive labels made of steel, of course. And so if you were a client, you would stick this particular label on your product, such as a filing cabinet, and we ask, in order to allow you to do that, to be with us for a couple of years, so a contract of supply of 2 years, which basically supported, I would say that's the best word, it supported the customer retention. So the company could actually retain possession of the customer. So that's a co-branding application. It was a way to address one of the issues, because at the end of the day, plastic is plastics, steel is steel, they are commodities. How do you, in a circular economy business model, how do you are trying to secure that there is some customer retention? And that's an example of that. So it could be plastics, containing sustainable plastics brand. So as a business manager, you could come out with some aspect of that. And of course, you can email me if you need some help on that. So the conclusions. So as we said in the first session, we said the circular economy and circular business models are a very big opportunity. And if you remember the first session, we were talking about money, big economy, big opportunities in terms of financial input. But there are quite many issues. But in this particular session, I actually showed you what could be done in order to address the problems and the limitations. So I explained that networks are a very important part of it, and you cannot have a circular business model without a network that supports it. There's multiple companies. However, you also need to have mobilize digital technologies, because digital technologies not only manage the information which enable you to predict where the refurbished materials are coming from, but also what qualities they are, and actually supply the work in automation in order to perform the refurbishing, the manufacturing, and so forth, which, if performed by humans, might put the cost over the odds. So that's it. This concludes our 2-lecture cycle. Of course, more will come. So my advice is, please subscribe to the channel. So as I post more of these lectures, you'll be able to access them. Of course, you can get in touch with me if you got any questions or suggestions, or if you want to know more. And of course, you can visit the website, the Center of Research in Just Transitions, which is a CSE or Community Interest Company. And if you want more of this work to be done, just donate. So these videos are free. I'm very pleased that people look at it. But what you can do is subscribe to the channel and donate through our website. Thank you very much. I'll come and stop sharing so you can actually see me. So thank you very much. I hope you found this section useful and stimulating in terms of course, that's just the basic. There may be an opportunity for you to find a little bit more about it. And if you are performing some sort of coursework or doing some sort of coursework, then I hope that this is going to somewhat be useful. Thank you very much and have a good day.